Okay.
Yeah.
And Catherine has joined us again.
Oh, she has. Excellent.
All right. Hi, Catherine, and welcome. We are starting. And so we are going to reintroduce ourselves. Pastor Hughes, how do you want to reintroduce yourself?
Allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm I'm Reverend Dr. Wylie Hughes. I hail from Atlanta, Georgia. I am currently the pastor of Orchard Park Presbyterian Church in Orchard Park, New York, suburb of Buffalo, and I'm happy to be here.
And I am Jonathan Freirich, former rabbi of Temple Beth Zion here in Buffalo, New York, and other synagogues in places like Charlotte, North Carolina, and South Lake Tahoe. I served as a rabbi on campus, a dangerous place to be Jewish nowadays, in Cleveland and in Tucson, Arizona. Most recently, I have been a coalition organizer for Voice Buffalo, and I just applied today actually to do some campaigning for the New York State Senate Democratic Committee. So we'll see how that works. So we promised a follow-up because I think, honestly, Pastor Hughes and I, Reverend Hughes and I could probably talk for a while on a lot of topics. But we wanted to continue this conversation. We started last time with this idea of whether or not DEI was serving its purpose. So we had an article that brought that into question, and the answer is, of course, complicated. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea of the historic Black Jewish alliance, or African American Jewish accompliceship, which is really where I'd like to see us head. I'd like to see us be accomplices in the act of justice. And in so doing, of course, I take full responsibility as a Jewish person for the fact that the Jewish community has had a tendency over the last 50 years to rest on our laurels, to say, oh, we are, you know, pro civil rights because there were Jewish co-founders of the NAACP. Here in Western New York, by the way, over 100 years ago. Or we Jewish people, we participated in civil rights because we had freedom riders who gave their lives for the cause, because we had a prominent rabbi, Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was photographed multiple times, including the photo that I used to promote this week with Dr. King and marching. And, Pastor Hughes and I are not spring chickens, but neither of us were alive when those things happened. And so I do not get to take credit for the civil rights, anti-racist actions of my ancestors if I'm not actually doing something too. And so then we get into the more complicated question today, which is that the African American population who happen to be Jewish is the most undercounted population of Jews in America. Now, this is not surprising because historically African Americans are, since the Civil War, since African Americans were no longer being counted for the sake of the voting power of their enslavers, African Americans have become the most undercounted population, especially for things like census and apportioning of districts and all sorts of democratic issues. So the idea that Jewish, Black Jews, Jews of color, as often people identify as, would be undercounted is not surprising. What's really unsurprising is that Jews would undercount ourselves. For those of you who don't know the numbers about Jewish population, the number of worldwide Jews is estimated somewhere in the realm of 16 million. That's 1/6 million. About 7 million in Israel, maybe a little bit over 7 million in Israel, about 6 to 7 million in the United States, and a couple of million that spread over the rest of the country, the rest of the world. That is fewer Jews in 2024 worldwide than there were before the Holocaust in 1937. In 1937, there were estimated 18 million Jews worldwide. We lost 6 million, 1/3 of our population in the Holocaust, and we have not recovered that since. So here in the United States, we would want to count Jews. How undercounted are Jews of color in this country? The best estimates of the number of Jews in this country are between 100,000 and 1 million. In a population of less than 6.5 million, for us to miss 900,000 people is insane. So why is that? Well, I'll tell you, because if Pastor Hughes and I were to walk into a synagogue, both of us wearing yarmulkes, both of us ostensibly looking Jewish, both of us knowing where to sit and what to do, Pastor Hughes would be asked, "So, how are you Jewish?" and would not be made to feel comfortable or at home in the same way that I would be. And Jews of color have gotten the message. So we don't know. So here we are. We are a not entirely white group of people who are a minority of our own, who have a history of working with our African-American neighbors to try to bring civil rights and justice to this country. And we've all failed and continue to fail, but the relationship should be better. So why isn't it better, aside from the ways that I've talked about? And what are your thoughts on this, Wylie?
I would sum it up with just white supremacy. I think that white supremacy is the reason for that, because you get into not to get into the weeds of it, but I think that, and this happens with every other ethnic group, especially in America, but even in Europe and the UK, is that as close to whiteness as you can be, that is the default. And so you have this tendency for ethnic groups to associate with whiteness because whiteness is privilege, whiteness is power. And so, and that's not even along religious lines, that's just socially speaking. And so, and again, I'm not a Jewish by any stretch. I know many Black Jews. I went to school with many Black Jews, and they have told me specifically that it's a racist problem, because the majority of the Jewish population, when it comes down to it, will identify as white when it suits them. The solidarity between Blacks and Jews has always been predicated on proximity to whiteness. And so
what do you mean by our solidarity has been predicated on proximity to whiteness? What do you mean by that?
Well, when I say, again, if you have the privilege of being a minority, but also being not a minority, right? And that's a choice. You can consider yourself a minority, and that would put you in proximity with other minorities. But then you can also say that you're not a minority, that you can identify with the majority or with the people in power at the expense of the minority, the actual minority. And it's
so are you saying that our solidarity is to a certain extent, as you said, predicated on Jews being able to sympathize but not be bound by the same difficulties?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I'm saying that it's a very nuanced conversation. I'm not drawing black and white here. I'm just saying that it's an allyship that is not as ironclad as you would think it would be.
And do we want to look at the second half of the 20th century? So a follow-up article to the one that I've been sharing is not as convincing in my mind. It talks about how the golden age of American Judaism is over. And if we look at the second half of the 20th century, Jews many Jews, because not all Jews, because this is part of the problem with the article, right, is generalizing about the Jewish
A
population.
gross generalization. Oh, yeah.
Right. So many Jews achieved an unrivaled level of prosperity in sort of the history of Jews as a minority in other societies between 1950 and 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So American Jews, prominent American Jews, looked like they were doing great. Now, does that, it is a corollary to that potentially that because, as you said, the proximal whiteness may have grown farther apart.
Mm-hmm.
There was less reason for Jewish leadership who, if you look at the early part of the 20th century, were still, concerned with quotas at
Right.
Ivy League schools, who were still, excluded from majority society in the United States, where Jewish identity was in fact something to overcome. A local Jewish person here in Buffalo said that Jewish participation has suffered by virtue of Jewish integration. That when Jews no longer needed to socialize only among Jews, that participation in synagogues dropped. His diagnosis.
Oh,
so
yeah.
The same could be said about justice issues.
Yes.
When justice issues no longer felt like they applied as strongly to Jewish integration, especially for the best off of Jews, then the attention to the African-American partnership became less important because it was no longer our civil rights.
Right. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And that and you see that played out in many, many different strata of society in this country, not just in the realm of justice. We're talking about, I mean, and I'm following a woman on TikTok who's an Asian American, and she talks about this every one of her videos. She talks about it all the time. She talks about how when her parents immigrated here from China, they did everything that Korea. When they immigrated to America from Korea, they did everything in their power to assimilate into white culture. And to the point where she never really learned Korean. Her brothers and sisters never learned Korean at all because their parents wanted them to be American. And what was American for them was not blackness at all. The America that they wanted to assimilate to did not include people of color, even though Americans treated them like people of color, right? And so there was this cognitive dissonance that she grew up with saying, well, you want us to be white, but they don't see us as white. And the Asians who participated in the civil rights movement kind of understood that. And so they were, we talked about, she did an article, a video about the Japanese American who helped Malcolm X with his movement after he left the Nation of Islam, and how she got much better treatment from law enforcement than her Muslim brothers and sisters who were doing the same things, and how she wrestled with that, and how she was like, well, gosh, here I am. I'm really fighting for all of us, not just Asians, not just African Americans, but all of us who are considered immigrants or who are considered less than desirable in this country for equal rights, and yet I'm still getting better treatment than my people of counterparts of color. What is this? Crying in.
So this is exactly what you're talking about. It's a memoir by Michelle Zosner, who talks about the Korean American experience, and it's a powerful book called Crying Benchmark. She was part of the Babel in Buffalo series this year.
Oh, okay.
So worth the look for everybody else. But this is so. I think the issue of conditional whiteness is a big issue, right? Everybody wants to be white. even Black people,
Oh yeah, even Black
right?
people.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the advantages of the white majority.
Hmm.
However, part of the American bait and switch is those advantages are always conditional,
Correct.
even for the richest and most advantaged white patriarch.
Correct.
Screw up and you're out.
Yes. Cancel culture.
For sure. So here we have this question of, if we are going to successfully ally, accomplice with one another, how are we going to do that if we're going to take seriously Isabella Wilkerson's analysis of the caste, right?
Hmm.
Because of course the caste system is a constant striving to rise up the ladder, to get
Right.
up at the rung, another rung. And it's the system itself that's the problem.
Hmm. Hmm.
Getting everybody up rungs is not the goal. What we need to do is deconstruct the system that requires there to be so many people underneath everyone.
Right. Right. These are some
Uh,
of the things that Malcolm X, they say that Malcolm X was killed for saying those exact things. And I'm a big, huge fan of Malcolm X's work. Gosh, I listen to his work every day. What Malcolm X said often, when people question him about his disassociation from the Nation of Islam and the so-called Black Muslim movement and his embracing of Orthodox Islam and his workings in Africa and other, and his stance on Palestine and all that, was that he wanted us to understand that it is the social structure itself that is the blame, that this is not a fight against Muslims and Jews, or Jews and Christians or Muslims. This is a fight against the culture, that social order that separates us from our similarities, right? He talked about the struggle of African Americans. He talked about the struggle of Afro-Brazilians, the struggle of Afro-Cubans, the struggle of Afro-Palestinians, and then he talked about the struggles of other people who are oppressed in European countries, not just Jews, but Roma, the Gypsies. He talked about all of these people suffering under the same regime. And that regime was this concept of whiteness. And that if we're really going to come together as a people and conquer these and address, not conquer, but address the problems that we all share, we have to attack that. And so that was a thing that was going to unify that movement. And they say that, that was what got the attention of the powers that be. They said, this man is trying to unify people who would not normally be unified. We have
well,
we have to do something about that.
and one analysis of the early origins of Black enslavement in the United States is a deliberate attempt to drive apart the
Yes.
working class
Oh yeah.
people in the early colonies in the early
Oh yeah.
1600s, because the owner class wanted to continue to extract as much as possible.
That's right.
And by creating an enslaved class, they in effect took on all the poor white people as allies in enslaving.
Right.
So here, there is a sort of conceptual systematic question that I think is maybe a cornerstone for us beginning to build something new.
Mm-hmm.
In part, it comes with a little bit of an argument against Ibram Kendi's and maybe even the 1619 Project's identification of enslavement and racism as the original sin of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's be clear, we've got plenty of original sins. And one of the things that happens when we focus too much on racism is we miss out on its wonderful step siblings of oppression, namely
Yes.
misogyny and sexism and anti-Indigenous genocide,
Hmm.
among others. And to reuse sort of the intersectional concept as an understanding that it's not, I don't gain merit by having more angles of oppression, right? I'm not a better person or a more qualified worker because I can line up all the different ways in which I am an oppressed people in the intersectional.
Right.
What I can do, however, is I can say the systematization of oppression is much more resilient when it's intersectional. That
Exactly.
is to say that one of the linchpins, so for example, getting back to this whole Jewish black thing, uh, uh, contemporary American white supremacy and white
Hmm.
nationalism is that if white people are in fact superior to everybody else, and by white people, of course, we're talking about white Christians of a certain
Hmm.
descent,
Hmm.
then there needs to be a villain behind the influx and challenges of inferior peoples, right? So the hypothesis here is that white people are superior, and therefore immigrants and black people and people of color are inferior. So how could those inferior peoples be threatening the white people? Well, the answer came to all of us in Charlottesville in the neo-Nazi march,
Yeah.
where they chanted, Jews will not replace us.
Right. The great replacement theory.
Right,
Hmm.
which is a manifestation of a long thread. It's a new articulation of something
Same
that's been
old,
going
yeah,
on for a
same old
long
song.
time,
Oh yeah.
which identifies African Americans and immigrants and as the problem caused by the manipulation of an insidious other, that is the Jew.
Hmm.
Because only the Jew could be so nefarious and ingenious as to utilize other people to
Right.
undermine America.
Right.
So when I say, intersectional, what we're seeing is you don't get white supremacy and anti-black racism without this horrendous anti-Semitism
Hmm. Hmm.
mixed in with an incredible abuse of women's rights, because at the heart of this, and there was an amazing take on this on the podcast Amicus this past weekend about the in vitro fertilization stuff.
Yeah.
Control of women's bodies and control of women as a resource is part of all of this.
Hmm.
Because, of course, part of the horrendousness of American enslaving of Black people was the American enslaving of the offspring of Black women.
Of course, it was taking control of the black womb that perpetuated slavery well beyond what it was. I mean, they knew that they couldn't keep it going for too long. They knew they couldn't.
And also, subsequently, the control of white wombs.
Exactly, because that was part of that, right? So you
Because,
you can't continue to subjugate a person, a people, without having some kind of influence on their offspring, right? It's just not possible.
so all of this is interwoven. And what we need to do is begin to pick it apart by saying each of these parts are part of the system. And the
Hmm.
reason why, right, the reason why Ibram Kenty identifies racism as so malleable,
Right.
again, is because it's not ideological, it's practical.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
how do I continue to oppress these people for
Yeah.
profit?
Right. Right.
And I'm going to come up with whatever idea suits me best at the time.
Well, because you're going to look at history, right? You're going to look at how how white supremacy was made and has been maintained over the past 150 years, right? You're gonna look at that and say, well, that's very practical how they did that. They didn't sit down and write articles about it. They said, well, this is how we got to keep this going some kind of way. So, um, that's sort of where we must start. One of the things that again, I keep quoting Malcolm X today. One of the things that
That's okay.
one of the things that Malcolm X said often was that you have to find where you have to determine who gains from this kind of thing. Where does the profit lie? Because this is not just like an arbitrary thing where hey, let's pick on these people. Hey, let's enslave those people. No, it's about, okay, how can we keep this going, and how can we keep our benefits? How can we keep this income stream viable? And so in order to understand these things, you have to know who benefits from it. There's an old proverb from the African continent. I don't know what part of the African continent, but it says, if you put black ants and red ants in a jar, they live peaceably. You shake the jar, the ants try to kill each other. And so is this about getting the black ants and the red ants to talk to each other and have a great sit down, and let's love each other, let's not kill each other, peace not war? Or do we say, hey, black ants, red ants, look at who's shaking our jar? Mm-hmm. And then the second question is, do we even belong in a jar in the first place? Right? So we have to get to this place where we can understand that there's someone who is shaking our jar.
Well, and so this amazing scholar, Manisha Sinha, wrote a book called The Slave's Curse, A History of Abolition. She's written a new book, which I haven't gotten yet. And okay. What it's of a piece of W.E.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction. It's, okay, hundreds of pages of chronicling the ideological history of abolitionism, mm-hmm. which is a growing ideology organically and with thousands of partners through the course of history. And unlike racism, it is ideologically sound. Mm-hmm. It is the good idea of all people being created equal, mm-hmm. writ large.
Right.
So we have a history of working on this together. One of her big arguments is this idea that somehow abolitionism was a white person's movement to free Black people. Which of course it was not.
It was not, but I can see why people would assume.
Because again, we have this paternalistic idea of American history that somehow, which reifies the racist idea that Black people can't take care of themselves.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a book written by last name Raboteau. Oh, what's his first name? Albert Raboteau. He wrote a book called Slave Religion. I read this in seminary, and then it was talking about the evolution of religion among captive Africans in America. But one of the things he talked about was, he said, and this was written back in the 50s or 60s. One of the things that he talked about was how abolition, it was an African American thing from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And that the first abolitionists were enslaved human beings who said, we got to get out of here. And what happened was,
who had to fight for their abolition in states where slavery was illegal.
Exactly. Right. So these were the first abolitionists. And he talked about how the American abolition movement has a white face only because it was taken up by white people afterwards. So we talk about the Underground Railroad as if this was something that was created by these great abolitionists, when really what they were doing was drawing on what was already there. There was already an Underground Railroad happening for many, many years before whites sort of got on the train. And you hear this in a lot of African American spirituals, where they talk about people and places. Peg Leg Joe. These were people who were conductors of the Underground Railroad. They were legends. They inspired folk music. But they were the abolitionists, because they were the ones who were going into the South, going onto the plantations, playing music under the guise of, we're here to entertain you. But the music was code language. They were talking about follow the drinking gourd, which was the North Star, the Big Dipper. So this is sort of the spirit of abolition. And Frederick Douglass later on sort of talks about that a lot in his many speeches. He says that, we've been doing this for a long time. and you guys are just now you guys are late to the party, but we welcome you anyway. We thank you, appreciate that.
Well, abolitionism needs to be a big tent because liberalism
Exactly.
needs to be a big tent.
Of course, of course.
Uh, one of the things that is troubling about our current situation in 2024, right, with the response to October 7th, even before the Israeli Defense Forces responded to the horrific pogrom, rape, murder of Israelis by Hamas and Palestinian civilians as well, so Gazan civilians, there was an anti-Jewish backlash, a blaming of Israel from the start. A situation where students on college campuses throughout the country are in danger, where high school students and grade school students are being called anti-Semitic diatribes in classes by teachers who are not being defended by their administrators, where in Oakland, the number of people pulling their kids out of public schools and putting them in Jewish day schools for the first time in history, Jewish day schools being a constant, worry about them failing, is historically out of proportion. We have hundreds and thousands of students now, parents now looking for other options that they probably can't afford. We have a breakdown in civil society with regard to Jews in large part because we have a breakdown in liberalism.
Okay. Say more.
So one of the key planks of liberalism is the idea that you and I don't have to agree to work together. In fact, our agreement is unnecessary for any collaboration. We get to agree moment to moment on the thing we're working on. But universality of opinion is illiberal. That there is no litmus test that you have to pass to be my friend if you're friendly to me.
Okay.
We are co-citizens with equal rights. What has happened on the illiberal left at the same time as we have an authoritarian right is an intolerance for difference of opinion.
Okay, I can agree with that.
So, for example, this is not new. As recently as far back as 10 or 15 years ago, students at the University of Southern California student government were casting out from the student government were a fellow student because she was Jewish and had shown pro-Israel sentiments in her private life, that they identified that as disqualifying for participation in student government. So illiberalism often manifests for Jewish people as anti-Semitism because, of course, the thing that Dara Horn raises is that when there is an enemy to justice, that enemy can always be Jewish. And she points out the history of anti-Zionism does not in fact start with Israel, it starts with the Soviets. That calling Jews Zionists and being anti-Zionist was a way in the early 1900s, before there was a state of Israel, for the Stalinist regime to purge Jewish people.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
I have to ask a question. So I'm not denying what you're saying. I agree. I just see it from a different perspective.
Please.
I see Jewish students being barred from public discourse, or being barred from certain public gatherings, or being barred from, whatever, clubs or whatever the case may be. I see that through the similar lens of segregation in America in the 50s and the 60s. I see that mirrored, that same behavior mirrored in how African Americans were barred from certain places because they were Black. And yet, the how that is treated, how that was treated versus how this is being treated are two totally different things.
So part of the difference is it happening on the left. That when progressives,
but it happened on the left in the 50s and 60s too.
For sure.
Right.
But what's happening now is people are saying, you know, you're Jewish, you can't participate in the Women's March.
Okay.
Because
I still see it as the same thing. I still see it as the same thing.
Because Jews can't be for justice. That to be Jewish means that your wealth, potential wealth, discounts you from participation in progressivism, which no one would ever say to an LGBTQ person.
Not yet.
Right.
Well, I guess what I'm
saying, you come from a good family, therefore it doesn't matter that you're
right,
that you're an oppressed minority.
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
And,
yeah. Go ahead.
And you know, the segregational prohibitions about who gets to come in and out in the 1950s and 60s is of a different piece, because what we're seeing now is you know, the resurgence of an illiberal left.
Yeah, but I don't see it as different. I don't see it as different. I see it as the exact, listen, I see it as white supremacy through and through. It was white supremacists then, it's white supremacists now. They're using the same tactics on Jews and LGBTQ people and whoever, Japanese, they're using the same tactics that they used on us for 150 years. It's the same thing. And so I hear what you're saying, actually. And I when you say a resurgence, I don't see it. Yes, it is a resurgence for some, but for others, it's the same thing. It never went anywhere. You know, for me, it never went anywhere. It's just that they're trying to find a new person to oppress, because someone has to be oppressed. That's white supremacy. Somebody has to we have to put our heel on somebody's neck. It was Black people for a while, but now it's not become as lucrative as it once was. So let's find us another Black person. Or here are the Jews, here are the Japanese, here are the women. Okay, well, we got immigrants coming in. Let's put our foot on their neck. Let's put our foot on the neck of somebody so that we can keep this machine going. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll accept that. So how do we counter the liberalism that is now sort of the norm, both on the left and in the right in our society?
Yes, that's the thing. And you said it exactly. It is happening on the left and the right. And maybe that's where our problem lies, is that we're sort of we're not realizing that the left and the right are just two sides. Left wing, right wing are just two wings on the same bird. You see, and so maybe for us, if we want to be in allyship or accomplishship, if that's a word, did I make up a word?
We are devoted to that word.
Yes, let's devote ourselves to that word. For us to be accomplices and to further our accompliship, we have to devoid ourselves of that mentality, thinking that this is a left or a right kind of thing. And
for sure.
And really talk about who's shaking the jar and to address who's shaking the jar. What benefits are being taken away when African Americans and Jewish Americans come together and accomplish it? Who stands to lose in that coalition? That's where we need to start. Who loses when we come together? When we align ourselves with each other, when we fight for each other, when we sacrifice for each other, who loses?
The issue is the fear that we will actually do what we are promised as Americans. So, for
Okay.
example, one of the failures of American social engineering has been an attempt to try to address poverty as a Black issue.
Oh, of course. Yes. Right.
Because as soon as we identify poverty as somebody else's issue, if I'm not
Mm-hmm.
Black,
Mm-hmm.
then we don't address it at all.
Right.
We have significant evidence from the last 5 years to show that during the pandemic, during the worst of the pandemic, the greatest progress in recent history was made against child poverty.
Mm-hmm.
How? By actually giving people money. Turns out people who are struggling with poverty know how to spend money
Mm-hmm.
to help them stop struggling with poverty.
Mm-hmm.
So if we disentangle the white supremacist idea that poverty is a Black problem and that we don't trust Black people with money,
Mm-hmm.
and remind ourselves that struggling with money is a societal problem, and the people
Yes.
who are best capable of figuring out how to spend money to alleviate their struggles with poverty are the people struggling with poverty.
That's right. That's right.
Because they know that they need to pay their rent. They know
Mm-hmm.
that we know that we need to pay our car insurance.
Well, yeah, and on top of that, people who and I'm speaking from experience. I grew up in poverty. I grew up. Let me tell you, I didn't know I was poor until I got to high school. I didn't even know what poverty was until I got to high school. When I started interacting with people who were not poor, and I'm thinking, oh wow. So I understand what it means to struggle financially. I understand what it means to say, you know what, I can't. I'm going to pay for the water bill so that we can have water, or I'm going to pay for gas so that our water can be hot, and we're just going to let the lights turn off this month. I know what that's like. And I remember my mother saying to me often, she was like, you know what, if I just had X amount of dollars more for the month, we would be okay. So you're right. People in poverty know how to spend money. The issue is that people in poverty are not given access to how money actually works in this country. We African, yeah,
there's no
like,
doubt. I
you
mean,
know,
but we can't solve poverty by giving people financial counseling
no,
without money.
no, what I'm saying is we cannot, but we also cannot solve poverty by just dumping money on the problem, right? We can't
No,
do that
well,
doesn't quite work.
actually, it does work.
Mm, it's not a lasting. It doesn't last.
It
It doesn't.
doesn't last if
It.
we don't also change the system and allow people to work for a living.
But that's my point. That's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at.
Right.
Like it works
So
unless the
if we
system.
don't, so you asked two benefits when you and I don't work together, when we don't have a Black Jewish alliance.
Right.
The people who benefit are the people who are at the top, because when we work together, we come up with a solution that
That's
says,
right.
oh, Thomas
This
Piketty, the
is your
French
problem.
economic historian,
Yes.
says, the most effective way to overcome the wealth gap would actually be giving everyone a access to publicly funded wealth when they enter adulthood.
Exactly. Exactly.
If every 21-year-old citizen in the United States gets $200,000.
Mm-hmm.
And what's lacking in our poverty programs is trust. Trust in the idea that somehow or another, everybody who is struggling is not trying to take advantage of the system, right? We created the welfare queen story, on
it was big back in the 80s and the 90s, man. Very
right.
big. Yeah.
At the same time that we created a super predator criminal.
Yes.
For
Oh my
young
gosh.
African Americans.
Yeah, those are the Clinton years.
Yes. So because Clinton's great innovation was taking the Reagan Revolution and making it democratic.
Yeah. 3 strikes rule. Gosh, decimated our communities. Anyway.
Yes, and leading directly to an opioid epidemic that was
Decimating.
destructive to white communities.
Exactly. Now it's an epidemic.
Who created all of those things were rich white people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right? The crack epidemic was created by Iran-Contra.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The opioid epidemic was created by the family whose name I try to forget.
I know what you mean. The oxycodone people.
Yes.
Yes.
So here we have a continued exploitation of people with less for the benefit of people with more.
Yes.
So who stands to lose when we work together cross lines are the people who have the most.
That's right. That's right. 100%.
One of the critiques of our current president, President Biden, is that he doesn't listen to anybody.
Interesting.
That, albeit he's very strategic and very capable of gaming things out, right? So he has a longer vision about how things will work than a lot of the people around him, probably just by virtue of, as Ginny, my better half, has said, that he's not possible to argue with.
You can't argue with him. Yeah, he is quite ancient.
This question raised a question of seeing the world that I think I'm raising to you. I feel like Americans are consumed with trying to find underlying causes to basic things, right? This is our idea, our pattern recognition obsession that leads to conspiracy theories, right? There must be some way that things are moving in order to create this outcome, as opposed to the actual reasons for it. Because if we were to do real analysis of what's actually going on, people struggling with poverty do better when they have money, for example, and good jobs.
Yes.
Then we could also, instead of trying to find hidden causes, work on realistic hypotheticals. Because part of what we are lacking is one of the things that President Biden calls on us, which is faith in our ability to get stuff done. If we were to help everyone by giving them a minimum income, then we would need to make sure that employers paid that minimum income. Then we would need to make sure that those jobs were sustainable past the bump.
So the trust is misplaced. They don't trust the poor when who they should really not trust is the rich to do right. Well,
that's another great book called Winners Take All.
Okay.
I'll get the author to you, which points out that in the last 30 to 40 years, we have only trusted big business and profit taking as a way of solving everything.
Yeah.
And Ginny's addendum to my "we're not looking at hypotheticals" is we don't look at hypotheticals because they're not profitable. We only look at hypotheticals that have a payoff. And that the only people who are looking for a win-win on solving social issues are large corporate interests that want to make sure they make no sacrifices.
That's it. So that we don't really change. There's a guy named I can't think of his name. He's in Michigan. He said that. He said, the history of Western civilization has been built on that very thing. Let's create a system in a way that it can never change. We can give the illusion of change. We can give the illusion of progress. We can create the illusion of forward motion. But at the end of the day, it stays the same. We can pass whatever law we want. We can have whatever cultural revolution, whatever movement we like. But at the end of the day, we have to stay the same. And there's a whole lot more to that.
Right, but who needs to stay the same? The people who need to stay the same are the people who are already happy.
That's right. That's my point. That's his point. It's like, if you want to have a real revolution, then the people who are the most comfortable must be shown discomfort.
Right. So this brings me to a very interesting quote from sort of the world of ministers,
Hmm.
that our job as people who minister to congregations is to comfort the discomforted and discomfort the comfortable.
Yes, yes. Excellent quote.
And I do not believe that our houses of worship would actually survive us doing
I completely agree. 100%. If you
that.
want to keep your job, yeah, that's not the way to do it.
And so herein, you and I are collaborating with any number of people throughout Western New York, uh, a whole bunch of Quakers advocating for social change, uh, you know, uh, the Western New York Presbytery doing the same, the Lutheran Synod doing the same, the Anglican Church, which has a task force for the dismantlement of racism and oppression, which is, really they're 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 serious, and and so we have some infrastructures that actually care to change. So if what people fear is not change but loss, and what we are really asking for is the people at the top to actually suffer some loss,
Mm,
not significant loss,
yeah,
because again, I don't like the framing of the argument when, as it's been presented to me, that we'll never get white people to vote to give up their privilege.
hmm.
I think all of us have advantages. Some of them are fewer, some of them are more.
Although I'd like to see that debunked. I'd like to
But
see that one debunked.
which one?
That white people will never vote against their own best interests. I'd like to see that debunked.
Well,
I,
so
I'm waiting.
I, I'm not arguing with that. I'm not
Mhm.
arguing with that framing. I think the framing is not helpful.
Okay, okay,
I
gotcha.
think I think the issue is that we all have more advantages when they're shared.
I agree.
That's the argument that we need to make. That a system that um, has more graft in it for development than it does funding for maintaining our snowplows and our police cars
Hmm.
is a broken system, because
Hmm.
it means developers are getting rich and our roads aren't getting cleared. And instead of maintaining our police cruisers, we're buying new ones
Right, right.
because we don't have enough maintenance people.
Well, yeah, yay capitalism, right?
So instead, therefore, let's figure out how to invest in um, the vocational education that gets people trained to do necessary, needed
Yeah,
jobs like
yeah,
car maintenance.
right. Like we had before, right? Like a lot of this stuff, again, we had it. We had it.
Small amount of time.
It was so small. But within that small period of time, you saw the expansion of the middle class. Very positive expansion. It was across race. It was not even a racial thing, whites and blacks, right?
Internationally,
Internationally,
right? The period from the post World War II
post
period
World War II. Oh yeah,
up until 1970 was the most egalitarian
yes,
economic period in human
in
history.
human history, yeah, because they figured it out. Hey, we got to get the school is not for everybody. College is not for everybody. We need people who are going to fix toilets. We need people who are going to repair electrical stuff. We need mechanics. We need engineers. We need workers. We need these skills, these vocations, and government invested in it. There was a vocation in every high school in America. You had shop class, you had wood turning, and so by the time you graduated high school, if you didn't want to go to college, you could have been a journeyman in any kind of skill, bricklayer, anything. And that
Because we
helps
really
you.
don't need that many PhDs.
No, we don't. We don't, right? We need much more, many, more workers than we need PhDs. And so, but they took that away and they did that systemically for, you know, the white supremacy basically. But we're not going to talk about another conversation.
So what next then?
Mm.
what do we actually do now that we've laid out this Gordian knot of white supremacy and extractionist capitalism?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we've laid out all of the ways in which we succumb to being divided as opposed to united.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do to increase the civility and liberalism of our discourse? What do
I,
we do to build bridges?
I think we have to not succumb to identity politics, right? I think, and this is something that I even say amongst African Americans in my circle. I say the only way that the African American community, can ever progress and evolve is if we put aside identity politics. And that could mean a lot of things. Christians, Muslims, Hebrew Israelites, we have all of these identities within our community. And instead of us saying, okay, I'm a Native American, I'm an Aboriginal, I'm a Muslim, I am this, I am that, why can't we say, yes, I am these things, but all of us are suffering under the same oppression. And then let's put those identities aside long enough for us to come together on our shared struggles and addressing and solving our shared struggles. And so I would say that into this context as well. Let's put those identity politics aside so that we can actually come together to address our similar the similar oppression that we are experiencing. And I think that will be a strong foundation for a renewed coalition between us.
So there's this organization called Citizen University. Have you heard about it?
Citizen University sounds very familiar. Is this the one that they put people together like in conversation? They kind of put people of different backgrounds together in conversation, or is that something different?
Yeah, so they have like a Saturday get together meeting where they actually talk about issues of citizenship. And I wonder if we want to do something like that.
Oh yeah, you know what? I I have participated in this. I have participated in this. Speak to a citizen. Yeah, 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 yeah. I have done this. I have done this. This is very nice. I like it. I enjoyed it.
So, what do we say about trying to do something like this in Buffalo? And instead of and invite people to, cross neighborhood boundaries to come together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm all about it. I'm all about it.
Because I think this might be a small step towards creating the civic conversation that
Mm.
counters the illiberalism all over.
Yes. Yes. I would agree. That's a big step. That's a great step. That's a great place to start. It's a
All
great
right,
place to start.
so I am going to, in my spare time, see about see about figuring this out for the next month or two.
We lost Catherine.
We're at the end for
Oh,
so
oh yeah. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
uh so that's one piece of homework for me.
Okay.
And then I will tap into our extended email list of the people who participated in our multi-faith stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do we want to talk about next time?
We covered a lot of ground today. We covered a lot more than I thought we would. It all kind of intertwined. We didn't quite get to the well, no, we did. We did cover that. The Black Jew. Yeah, we did. We did. I don't know. I think you had something about wow, I don't know. That's a good problem to have though. What do we talk
So
about next?
um, I think this question of American consciousness and how we problem solve or don't,
Mm,
uh, how we see conspiracy theories instead of real problems,
mm,
how um, uh, I would I would I would like to take on you know the winners take all platform is that we have outsourced social change to um, profit making. So
Okay.
so the McKinsey process, right? Think tanks that and billionaires doing social change instead of social movements and government doing social change.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yes. Yeah, that's a good one.
so my proposed antidote to that is stakeholder engagement, is collaborative governance, is this whole school of actual relationship building and involving the people who are struggling with the problem in solving the problem. That
Right.
billionaires do not know how to solve poverty because they don't know anything
They're
about
not
poverty.
exactly.
Nor do graduates from Wharton or Harvard Business School working for McKinsey
Right.
know how to solve healthcare access issues. That trying to solve these problems as if they were uh, corporate consulting issues
hmm
is not helpful.
hmm
So I would like to maybe think about what would be helpful.
mm
What are proven procedures? How can we revitalize um, our use of the public resources, our use of our bureaucracy, our engagement with government to actually solve problems?
Okay. I think that's a good umbrella question to which
Uh,
all things will proceed.
you
Yeah,
know,
that's
since
good.
and if we come up with anything else, if anybody else has any suggestions, obviously contact us via Facebook or whatever. If you're seeing this somewhere, either on YouTube or whatnot, my email address is rabbijonathan@yahoo.com. Wiley's is Wylie at OPP Church.
oppchurch.org.
Okay.
hmm
And um, and we're going to try to do this again in 2 weeks. So that would make it Wednesday, March 20th.
I'm game.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Pastor Hughes, for your time and energy and wisdom and insight, and for holding me to task, for not allowing me to get away with saying things and just proposing them as if.
Well, this has been a great conversation. My pleasure, and let's keep it going.
Absolutely. All right. I am going to stop our other